Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. What happens when the SEC ultimately approves a spot Bitcoin ETF, maybe multiple spot Bitcoin ETFs, but then proceeds to sue market participants who embrace it? This is in line with the behavior that we saw with the Coinbase IPO, after all, isn't it? Coinbase got approved years ago. And then what happened? Coinbase gets sued. And so you got to kind of ask, what makes legacy finance think they'll be protected? Well, and maybe they are. Maybe it is as many have theorized, that it's just a move to protect incumbents as the incumbents get moved into place. Maybe they're actually fine. But there's an article that covers this. Here's a headline from the Crypto Basic. Expert says SEC chair didn't learn anything from Ripple and XRP defeats. And I want to get into that one because it covers that very topic. There's also this from you today. Ripple's top lawyer spots troubling pattern for SEC. And this is interesting because they highlight comments from Ripple's chief legal officer, Stuart Alderati. Also, though, there's comments from attorney John Deaton. And interestingly, billionaire Mark Cuban responded to a post from John Deaton. Yes, Mark Cuban of Shark Tank fame. And I'll share with you what he had to say. But yes, ultimately they're highlighting a string of failures from the SEC and what should be done moving forward. And then I want to briefly touch on this article from the Daily Hodl. No rhyme or reason, SEC Commissioner Hester Pur blasts her own agency's handling of U.S. crypto industry. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. So again, the first piece titled Ripple's Top Lawyer Spots Troubling Pattern for SEC. In a series of recent posts on the X social media platform, Stuart Alderati, Ripple's top lawyer, has called attention to what he perceives as inconsistencies and failings in the United States Securities and Exchange Commission's handling of crypto-related cases. Alderati's comments come amid ongoing legal disputes involving the SEC and various cryptocurrency entities, where courts have, on multiple occasions, criticized the SEC for its approach and decisions. And so here's the actual post on social media platform X from Stuart Alderati. A troubling pattern emerges, and he's got 4 bullet points. Number 1, and it's delightful to see this listed. I do take joy in this. Anytime there's an utter defeat from the SEC, like I bask in the glory of that, and I hope you do as well. Bullet point 1. Court finds the SEC demonstrated hypocrisy by making inconsistent arguments to the court and not acting out of a faithful allegiance to the law. That's the SEC v. Ripple, July 12th, 2022, 1 year and 1 day before what has become known as XRP Victory Day, when we got legal clarity for XRP. But that was a quote, faithful allegiance to the law. So again, that's the quote, that they're not acting out of that, faithful allegiance to the law, and engaging in hypocrisy. That's a quote. That is tremendous scorn. This is not something that you see. Like, typically, in a normal situation, a government agency is not necessarily going to be excoriated through normal processes and like just in the legal process in general. You have to really go outside of the norm and be complete asshat pricks to get that type of scorn from a judge. Bullet point number 2, court agrees that the SEC defaulted on its duty to respond in good faith to Coinbase's petition for crypto rulemaking in RE Coinbase. That would be June 6th this year, 2023. So that's another one. Third bullet point. Court finds that the SEC's, quote, inconsistent treatment of similar products is arbitrary and capricious, end quote. That's Grayscale v. SEC, August 29th of this year, 2023. And so obviously the fact that there's not a spot Bitcoin ETF right now today is absurd. Now, I still believe it's coming, but that's not the purpose of this video, so I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to mention it is absurd. It should have happened, and the court found that there was, quote, inconsistent treatment of similar products and that it's arbitrary and capricious. It's coming, folks. The SEC is outside of the realm of what they have power to do in not approving one at this point. Bullet point 4, court orders SEC to show cause why it should not be sanctioned for making false and misleading representations to the court. SEC v. Debt Box, and that's the newest one. November 30th, 2023. And so the failures, the losses, they keep stacking and stacking and stacking. And so it was just earlier this year that Kim Jong-Gensler was bragging about the SEC's victories up to this point. And now it's just failure after failure after failure. They can't get a damn win, man. So Attorney John Deaton reposted that and cited that most recent win from November. So I'm not going to read that part, it's on your screen, but that's part of what Attorney Deaton said or posted. And then he wrote, almost every single court that has dealt with the SEC in the last 3 years has called them out for lying. And then he tagged Patrick McHenry, congressman, said, where is the subpoena? Yeah, that would be nice to see, wouldn't it? Now, this is where billionaire Mark Cuban of Shark Tank fame jumps in and responds to Attorney Deaton, and he simply said something, voice of reason here, this makes sense. He says, someone needs to go FOIA madness on them. So he's, of course, talking about the Freedom of Information Act, which is something here in the good old United States that should allow some semblance of transparency to the public when it comes to government actions. And it actually does. Nothing's perfect, and yes, there can be some stonewalling from the SEC, and we've seen that time and again. But ultimately, if they don't hand over documents that should be public, if that's what's determined to be the case through a FOIA request, if that's approved, if they don't, there are serious penalties from a legal perspective. So typically, if there is a FOIA request, it actually does go through. It's just they can do things to slow down the process, this or that. But it's a real thing. So when Mark Cuban says someone needs to go FOIA madness on them, yep. And so I actually responded to Mark Cuban and wrote, yes, that's true. And Empower Oversight has been doing that, thankfully. Always more work to be done, though. And Empower Oversight, not-for-profit entity, they've been highlighting all sorts of stuff from them since they came on the scene. How long has it been? Has it been a couple years at this point? They've been around a little bit now. They're newer, but they've been around for a big chunk of what's going on in the SEC v. Ripple case the last couple of years. But they have done that. And there's been all sorts of information made public because of Empower Oversight that we wouldn't otherwise have. So it is a real thing. It's a real strategy. It actually works. Now that was reposted by Attorney John Deaton, and he said, Mark is 100 with the 100 emoji. And he wrote, Empower Oversight had success litigating FOIA requests versus the SEC. It can be done. We need a public citizen coordinated strategic multi-pronged FOIA approach, aka FOIA madness. And then he provides his email address for anybody that wants to jump on board with that. Attorney Bill Morgan reposted Stuart Alderete and said, thanks for that summary. It is conduct that is the exact opposite of the model litigant principles we have in Australia for how government agencies should behave in litigation. I doubt the SEC would even understand them. And then he shared an excerpt from what here he said is from Note 2 Appendix B Legal Services Directions. So this is Australian legal code, which reads as, quote, in essence, being a model litigant requires that the Commonwealth and its agencies, as parties to litigation, act with complete propriety, fairly, and in accordance with the highest professional standards, end quote. When I read that, were you thinking, oh, that's the SEC? No, zero humans would ever think that I was talking about the SEC by reading it. Zero humans on the planet. Because they are spawns of Satan, those little asshat prick attorneys at the SEC. They're like winged creatures flying around. Here's a headline from the Daily Huddle. No rhyme or reason. SEC Commissioner Hester Pur blasts her own agency's handling of U.S. crypto industry. Yeah. That's putting it lightly. But like, I'm glad she did. I'm glad she did. U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission official Hester Pur is launching another broadside against her agency over its regulation of the crypto sector. While speaking at the Blockchain Association's Policy Summit this week, Pur, one of the SEC's 5 appointed commissioners, argues that the regulator is bringing enforcement actions against old cases, quote, without clear rhyme or reason, end quote. Yes. And I know like she takes a lot of flack, but I'm mostly on board with her. And I don't think this has been made public, not that I'm aware of, but we are going to get to see the record of which commissioners actually voted in favor of bringing the lawsuit against Ripple. It has been reported by Fox Business that Hester Pur did not, but I haven't seen beyond that an official record of that. But my understanding is she's one of the good people. She's one of the good guys out there. And she did not vote to bring a suit against Ripple. So that counts for something as far as I'm concerned. Because if Jay Clayton weren't a little monster, then we would have had the votes necessary to prevent this whole thing, because he was one of 5 votes. Here's another quote from Hester Pur. There will come a time when people say, wait, do we really want to drive all of these companies out of the U.S.? When that time comes, we need to be ready with new ideas for U.S. regulation, end quote. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens in the realm of Congress, but by the time we get to this point, so much damage has been done. We'll see to what degree things can be remedied, but there's been a lot of ground ceded. There's a lot of development happening in other corners of the world that would be happening in the United States if not for the SEC. So that's a real thing. That's just set in stone. This is not what happened with the advent of the internet. So much of the technological revolution in that age happened here in the United States, where I live. That's just less of that here now. There's just less of it here because of these awful humans. And so it makes you kind of wonder, how are they going to behave when there ultimately is a spot Bitcoin ETF? Now, I have a hunch that market participants are going to be A-okay. If you're talking about traditional finance, spot Bitcoin ETF, I have a hunch that by and large, SEC's not going to give them grief. Maybe I could be wrong. Because they are asset pricks. I've said that many times. I don't know if you heard me say it, but I have said it. They're asset pricks. Spawns of Satan, winged creatures. And maybe fine. They approve the spot Bitcoin ETFs, and then the BlackRocks of the world, they come in, and then Kim Jong-Gensler just sues all of them anyway. Maybe. But the hell that will rain down upon Kim Jong-Gensler. I mean, it's like the number of lawsuits. And they'll lose on top of that. And then you got to kind of question too, like, even if Kim Jong-Gensler would do that, which is fine, it's a maybe. Even if, with how long things would take for everything to get in motion, for all of this is Kim Jong-Gensler even going to be in charge? Is there going to be a different administration in charge in general? Possibly. In which case, perhaps it's less likely. We'll see what happens. But, if it's the case that it's just, hey, let's give the crypto folks a hard time so we can get the incumbents in, well, if that's the actual plan, you wouldn't expect him to get sued anyway, which is, Attorney John Deaton's theory. And he could be right. So here's a headline from the Crypto Basic. Expert says SEC chair didn't learn anything from Ripple and XRP defeat. And they end up covering a quote. There's the key portions from an article from Real Clear Markets. There's this article. I'm not going to read the article. It's not necessary for the purposes of this video. It was written by a guy named Hassan Tyler and just rips into the SEC. But there were particular segments of this article cited by John Deaton's crypto law organization on social media platform X. And I want to share with you these specific quotes because it's on this very topic. And I'd love to hear in the comment section below what you guys think is actually going to happen on this, but I'm just at this point, I'm going to guess it ends up, once we get these spot Bitcoin ETFs in place, I'm going to guess that you're not going to see anybody that's participating in them given a lot of grace. I'm going to guess that it's not going to happen, whether it's because there's an administrative change, Kim Jong-Gensler's no in charge, or because it was part of the plan anyway, and the incumbents are now getting their slice. Whatever it is, I'm going to guess that it's not going to happen. I could be wrong, but that's my for fun guess. Here's the quote that John Deaton's crypto law organization shared from that article, Real Clear Markets. Gary Gensler seems to refuse to learn anything from Clayton's market-confusing actions. The conflicts of interest around Hinman, the failure to scrutinize SBF, or the failed case against XRP. End quote. And then there's another quote. What is going to happen when the SEC approves spot ETFs and then starts suing market participants, like it did when the agency approved Coinbase's 2021 IPO and then sued it in 2023, claiming its core business model was illegal from the start? It's a broad hypothetical, but entirely in line with the SEC's erratic and incoherent record. Moreover, will the SEC Ethics Office, or IG, ever investigate the conflicts of interest during Clayton's tenure, where the pronouncements from him and Hinman continue to affect market perceptions of Ether as spot ETFs are on the horizon? End quote. Yeah, good questions, right? And maybe it is the case. Maybe his hunch, it seems like it's his hunch, that once this happens, there's spot Bitcoin ETFs approved. Maybe the SEC does come after him. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm being too naive here. I'm being a naive little moon Lambo. You guys will just have to tell me what you think here. I mean, it's not a crazy idea. If you think that what's most probable is, yes, these incumbents, once this is approved, yes, they're going to get sued by the SEC or attacked in one way or another. If you believe that, totally reasonable. I don't think that's most probable, but I admit I could be wrong. I could certainly be wrong about that. It's certainly on the table, because there have been so many times where you're thinking, oh, come on, the SEC's not going to go that far. There have been multiple instances like that over the last few years, haven't they? And then they just do it. Just completely out of line of sometimes even of what would be an interest for them. They can't help themselves. There's just the egos of these people, these disgusting humans. So we'll see. You guys just have to let me know what you think. Crazy world we live in. So yes, troubling pattern emergence, says Ripple CLO. Yep, that's about right. Troubling for the SEC. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon Lambo.